evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Monday, October 23rd. It is 5:32 p.m. and I call this meeting of our Yuma Elementary School District Number 1 Governance Team work session to order. We've had dinner. Mr. Sheldon, would you welcome us and talk to us about what we're doing today?
Yes. We only have 2 items to discuss this evening. The first is discussion and information around the policy services that are offered by the trust. And we have Jennifer McClinton here to share that with us. So we'll do introductions here in just a moment. And then everybody's had a few weeks to look over the draft of the governance team handbook and make some comments and so then Board President Close will lead us through a discussion on that, looking at the comments, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion, and all voices will be heard. And if it hits 7 o'clock or so, it'll be time to go. Whether we've come to a resolution or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Jennifer, thank you for coming.
You're quite welcome.
I think we had a short discussion, information item about policy services at the last board meeting, and the board wanted more information. There's a lot of change in the air right now. We wanted the board to be able to hear from, directly from you and from the trust about what the services are, what the policy looks like, and what the processes are, and recommendations and so forth. So
Absolutely.
we want to go around the table.
That would be nice.
My name is Faith Kostrike, and I'm currently the governing board president.
I'm Dwayne Shepard, Associate Superintendent.
I'm
Teresa Fox, the board member.
pleased to meet you, Teresa.
Susie Alka, Associate Superintendent.
Susan.
Anthony Geyer, board member.
Anthony, pleased to meet you.
Keith Ware, clerk for the board.
Luciano Munoz, CJ Director.
Luciana, nice to see
Jamie
you.
Sheldon, superintendent.
Adele Henning, board member.
Adele, thank you. And I'm Jennifer McClinton. I've had the pleasure and the privilege of representing your district with my law firm at Gust Rosenfeld for many years. So your primary contact at Gust Rosenfeld is Rob Haas, but I've worked with Luciano on HR matters for 10 years.
12 years.
12 years.
But who's counting?
Right, but who's counting? So, and I have a 30-year history with that law firm, which I can't quite believe. And just like you can't believe your 7th graders celebrated their 30th anniversary, but I've been with that law firm almost my entire career. And I still am. I stayed with Gust Rosenfeld, but I've limited my practice in this year and gone to work as part-time as a consultant for the Arizona Risk Retention Trust, who, of course, you all are very familiar with the trust offerings. Not this past school year, but the school year before, the trust hired 4 law firms to rewrite policy. It was my law firm, Gust Rosenfeld, and I was the primary point of contact. Denise Lowell-Britt from Udall-Shumway, who I'm sure many of you have heard speak before. Denise Baton, who just retired from Deacon Cindy McDonald in Tucson, and then an attorney named Chris Welker, who you don't want to know because he only represents districts when you're in bad trouble. So you may not know him, but his law firm, Matt Wright's law firm, has been the primary law firm in charge of liability for the trust. And the trust wanted us to develop these policies from scratch because the members were asking for them. And frankly, I think the real reason the members were asking was because there was a concern that there might be some rogue districts out there. There were districts that were leaving ASBA and NSBA due to the politics of the National School Board coming out with a letter regarding parents and calling them terrorists, and there was unrest in that area, and they were concerned that there was going to be a void, and from the trust perspective that would be a huge problem because that would create more risk and more claims. And so as you all know, you're a part of this pool, insurance pool, that tries to limit risk and liability. The trust offers a lot of programs to do that. So they offer, for instance, the prepaid legal program that I've provided legal services under is offered to try to reduce risk. They have a cybersecurity program. They're starting up a sexual abuse molestation program. They have a transportation program that's really active. So this policy program is just one more benefit to offer to members. The trust is not going to do anything with your insurance if you don't choose to go down this route, but that's the why. I would say they were reluctant to get into the space, and the only part of my job that I don't like is the politics of it, the concerns about what's going on in the communities. That's difficult for me because I've partnered with ASBA for my whole career. So from my perspective, it's an option available for you. So I'll kind of go through. Monica, do you mind strolling through, or can I? Oh,
Yeah,
you've got it. Luciano,
Just
all
let me
right.
know.
Well, if I can interrupt you, that
Yes,
also the
please.
trust provides a lot of professional development.
We
In
do.
fact, we're looking at, they provide professional development on preparing for student suspension hearings, on student discipline, student hearing officer training, a lot of stuff around even facilities, where facilities directors can go and get training that'll help reduce liability around that. So we get a lot of benefit from the trust
They do.
already.
Title IX is another area they've stepped into recently because that's a huge, concern or avoidance. So they do. And there's an element, I'll talk about that, but there's an element of training involved with the model policy program as well. So go ahead. So I've talked a little bit about this and how it was created. The policies were created from scratch. One of the first decisions we made was let's scrap the alphabet, let's code numbers, kind of model it after the statutes. So I think it's a little bit more user friendly. Go ahead, Luciana. Thank you. They wanted, again, a nonpartisan, simplified solution to reduce the risk and to help make sure that the policies are updated in a timely manner as well. Go ahead. Again, benefits are that it's nonpartisan. It's a really easy platform. If we have the ability to go on the internet when I'm done kind of walking through, I can show you a little bit about what I like about it. So, there's 5 chapters. The first one is the one that would govern you all. So that has the information about open meeting law, your conflict of interest, board members' roles and responsibilities. The second chapter is about your employment of the superintendent, and really just 2 small policies, one on what his job duties are and one on evaluating him. The third chapter is business operations, so that would be Mr. Ponder's role in trying to make sure that all of the business matters are covered. It contains items regarding your technology department, your food services, your records, your transportation department is in that chapter. Chapter 4 would be Mr. Munoz's department, just HR. And then chapter 5 is the largest chapter. It's all about your students. And so there's areas in each chapter. We'll kind of go through this as well. Go ahead, Luciana. The member districts are linked on the trust homepage, so similar to the existing way that you link through ASBA's Policy Bridge, but you can also have the link separately. Some districts I don't think you all use Board Docs, some districts put their documents directly into Board Docs, but we'll have it, it's very easy technological interface, so easy to put up. And again, you can post them however you want to post them. They're your policies once you adopt them. Go ahead. This is what it looks like. This is what the trust website forward facing. This is available to the public. It looks different if you go on the trust website now because we have 13 districts, not just the first 2 adopters, but the first 2 were Queen Creek and Dysart Unified. And so that's, you click on those links to the left and it pops them up.
So you have 13 that you're currently working with. How many would you say are in the wings?
We have 13 that have adopted. We have between, I would say 10 to 15. We have at least 10 that have solidly agreed, and there's a slide later on, Madam President, that'll go through exactly who has agreed, but we have 10 to 15 total that are thinking. And one comes in every day, which is it. This is the buttons to the far left are the different chapters that we talked about. It's very usable in terms of being able to interface in different languages. It complies with all the ADA responsibilities, which is really nice. So, and then there's a glossary as well. So go ahead, next slide. this is what Queen Creek's chapter 1 looks like. So again, they have policies and then they have their procedures, which are the A, B, C. And then now Queen Creek's also, they added their forms right into that. So you can add your procedures, which are not board adopted, but which you generally would review to fill in the meat and bones of the policies. Next slide, thanks. This is what Queen Creek's looks like now, their chapter 5, and you can see their forms that they have for various items as well. So that's kind of what it looks like online. Go ahead. You can add whatever policies you want. So this is an example from Dysart. They wanted their mission statement to be front and center of their policy manual, and so that's their chapter, their policy 1-100. So I have a district this week that's asked if they can add a specific policy on how you serve process. We don't have a sample policy for that, but they wanted to add that, and that's no problem either. These are the current districts that have either already signed up or in the process. So the 3 largest that have committed to transitioning to our policies this year are Gilbert, Chandler, and Macy Unified in our area.
That's big.
Yeah.
Right. So
Also, I thought Flagstaff.
Flagstaff has already. So Arlington.
Oh, these are correct.
Yeah. So Flagstaff Unified has already transitioned. They're not on my list up here.
So that means all of these districts have left ASBA? Is that right?
So that's a very good question. You don't necessarily have to leave ASBA to move over to the policy services. And if you currently get your insurance through ASBA, you can't leave ASBA because you would need to be a part of ASBA in order to get your insurance through ASBA. And I don't think you are, right? For instance, Kyrene adopted last spring, and their board members want to partake of the conferences, and so they are staying a member of ASBA, but they're choosing to get their policies through the trust. So that's a decision point for your board. Others, Colorado River, Dysart, have declined to pursue moving forward with ASBA. Santa Cruz Valley is another one that has agreed to remain with ASBA, but they're using us for policy services. So it really is a choice and up to you. Next slide. It's very inexpensive, $500 to join, $250 every year. The reason it's inexpensive is because it's a benefit that they're offering to try to limit liability. I think the Board of Trustees is made of members, so different districts have representatives on the board for the trust, and they will reconsider the fee structure in February, but for this year it's that price. The comprehensive policy review is similar to what ASBA would do when they would come in and look at your policies and see if they're updated. That's what that means, and that would be myself and a woman named Lillian Lee, who's working with me, who's from Southern Arizona. She's lovely.
She's a former ADE,
Yes.
airport specialist.
She was, yes. Did you work with her when
Yeah.
she was there? Yes, she's formerly with ADE.
Nice person.
She's lovely. She was a teacher in Flowing Wells, so she has a long history with education. I'm thrilled she's come. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned you would come in and look at our policy, and maybe I just don't understand the policy that we have with the SBA is copyrighted, so we can't take that, bring it to you and say, use this. Is that accurate?
Very good question. So I think what you're asking, if the comprehensive policy review is if you adopt the trust policies and like 5 years down the road, you're like, I don't know if we've made all the updates yet, we would come in and help you update them.
Okay.
But what you're asking about is the practicalities of transitioning, which I will talk about.
Okay.
We kind of skip up to that
No,
because I think that that's the biggest jump for people and the biggest hurdle or concern. So next slide, I think we'll start. How would you go about this process? So your first step would be to preserve your existing policies because as a school district, you need to make sure that you have them if you're ever, God forbid, in litigation. Then you would notify us of the intent to join. The board would consider the policy agreement, would be on an upcoming agenda if you want to move forward. You'd provide us with the executed copy, we issue a purchase order. Next slide. And then you would begin the difficult process of transitioning over. And so to answer your question a little more specifically, your ASBA policies are copyrighted. Some of them you've probably changed, and those probably don't have the copyright on them anymore. So one of the easiest ways we've at the trust have prepared crosswalks, we've prepared checklists. I have the documents that I send, the 5 chapters that we talked about, I send them to the districts in a Word form. They're highlighted with all the things that, because there are some decision points. So some are easy. For instance, there's the policy on hiring an attorney, and there's an option for you to include in-house legal counsel if you have it. UMA 1 doesn't. That's easy. You just cross that out. Others are tougher. You'll need legal advice for them. One example is when you're looking at your existing leave policies, you don't want to leave any of your employees out in the dust because you switched policy manuals. So you have to carefully evaluate and make sure you scoop up any existing leave benefits that you have for your employees and make sure they're in your template sample UMA 1 policies. So that takes some more thought. Another example is your graduation requirements. You have less of a concern with that at the elementary school level, but that's been a heavy lift for some school districts. So those are some examples of places where you tailor. If you do have policies that you've already worked on, you can move those over. We'll just figure out where to put them. So I'll give you an example of this. Queen Creek recently, or not Queen Creek, Dysart wanted to amend their policies. They had a board member resign in a neighboring district, and they were concerned that the trust template policies don't talk about board member resignation because it's governed by statute. The district, you can't really do anything. You just submit names to the county and the county picks, right? So we didn't include it, but this Dysart wanted to have very specific procedures and policy in place about how the board was going to interview and recommend their 3 names. And so we tailored it and figured out where that went in Chapter 1. ASBA's covers that in their policy manual, but it's not, the language that was put into Dysart's was brand new language. Does that answer?
Yes.
Okay, good. And so again, the process to do this, I've done it quickly with some districts. Queen Creek is my poster child for fast. They decided to adopt the policies in early November, and we took 6 weeks over the holidays, and they had adopted by January 1.
Wow.
It was very quick, 6 weeks with the holiday breaks in there.
When
That
you
was
say we, who's involved in the transition?
very good question. In that instance, Queen Creek asked me to serve as their legal counsel to help. So I was helping and working with their administrators. You all could use Gus Rosenfeld, you could use whoever you want. If you choose to use Rob Haas, your typical counsel, then in all likelihood, Rob will have me do it. That's fine. And so I was
Just being honest.
Who's our expert,
and I've
right?
done it, I've done it for many districts. So I would submit a letter to you all just explaining my role as the I can't do legal work as a consultant. So explaining that you all are okay with that, then I would assist your administration. So for instance, Luciana and I would work together on the leave policies that we talked about. I would work with your superintendent and Monica on the Chapter 1 policies. Most school districts, and I would help you all develop a timeline, a plan. It would be up to you as the board what you would want to do. I've had school districts sit down in one Saturday and bang them all out as a board, so a huge study session. Most school districts, if they're thinking about doing this, it makes the most sense to have it be effective on July 1.
Mm-hmm.
So most school districts will take the time over the next semester to say, in January, we're going to consider Chapter 1. In February, we're going to consider Chapter 2. And that makes the most sense. But it's all up to you. You could do, Kyrene would do a couple study sessions. They would do a couple chapters and they did theirs by remote access. They did theirs remotely because their building was under construction, their administrative room. So, but that's the process would be, I would send the chapters to your administrative team. We would figure out a schedule for you all. We would divide up the work. Your administrator team would take the first draft. They ask us questions. I'm always available. Those who worked with me can say that I'm responsive, and we'd get going and moving on, answering their questions. It's someone described it to me as it's not hard, but it's time consuming. I think that's accurate. It's not hard, but it does take time. And the biggest thing that people worry about is they want to make sure that what you've already taken time to adopt, that you don't lose. And so we would double check and see where you are differing from the template policies, where you've made adjustments that are unique to UMA 1. So that's who would do it.
Okay, thank you.
And then once you've reviewed, you notify of your intent to cancel the contract. I don't know what year you're in with ASBA and your existing contracts you're in.
This is your 1 of 3.
One of 3, yeah. Let's
Okay.
say 2 or 4, yeah, but 1 of 3.
Okay. So my understanding is that that people aren't being let out of the obligation to pay.
Right.
So, right. And so, that's a choice for you all to make. Some districts have chosen to, well, we'll talk to you in a couple of years. It's fine. Whatever is best for you. And then one thing that we learned from the early adopters is there are a lot of downstream documents that refer to policies that you forget about. So for instance, the handbook that you all are talking about tonight probably refers to your existing policies, your training documents. When one school district went to go do their Moodles and they're like, whoops, that refers to old, not new. Forms in HR in particular, the forms, your prior written notices, and your in special ed, your, a lot of those kinds of things will.
Just got bigger.
Right. So planning for that's part of what we're doing is laying out the timetable and the workflow for making sure that those things get hit too, so that you don't have any surprises after the fact, and so that you're ready to go come July 1 with a new package.
Thank you to the early adopters to work out all the wrinkles.
Yeah, there's, Kyrene is actually, we're doing a webinar on Thursday, so I'm pulling in their board president, their legal counsel who's in-house, and one of the administrators who kind of took the reins and helped them on Thursday. If you want to listen, if you want more trust policy, you're welcome to listen in. But I think it is helpful to learn from others that, Patty Rogers in Kyrene or in Queen Creek was the one who told me, Jennifer, make sure you do this. So that's helpful. After transition, I'm primarily responsible for doing the updates. That was new for me this year and kind of fun. For me, I have traditionally stayed out of how the sausage is made down at the legislature. I got involved in it exactly one time in my career and learned that was a very eye-opening process. But the trust has lobbyists they work with, so I kind of piggyback onto whatever they're doing, make sure that I'm on top of all year, making sure I was on top of what was being passed. It was easy this year because Governor Hobbs vetoed everything, so so that was easier for me. And then it was, wasn't it? We came out with the update in August, and the trust used the same process for the update that we did for the creation. So I drafted it, and then I vetted it with the same law firms. Denise Baton is retired, but a longtime in-house attorney named Michelle Tom is now at DeConcini McDonald, and she's going to fill in that role. So, and we also vet it with superintendents or business managers. We've definitely made sure that others had eyes on it. Karen Smith from one of the auditing firms looked at the business section, for instance. When we went through the first process, we had a lot of eyes on it before we finally published. In fact, I think the trust was annoyed because we kept saying, wait, one more month. And they had to sit in the room with 4 lawyers and debate and if and all this. So if you all are in prepaid legal, so you would just use your prepaid legal counsel to get help on what you had. But another avenue that people have done is hiring somebody from the outside if the project becomes too big to manage in-house, and I don't think it would be for you all, but if you wanted to, that's another avenue people have done, is to have sort of a project manager for this. So next steps is just to review the model policy. There's a lot of material on the trust. There's these fancy videos. There's, again, a webinar this Thursday. So I'm here to answer questions. I know it's a big decision for you all. It's, the primary thing that board members are volunteer to do is for their communities is make sure that your policies are in order and hire your superintendent. Those are your 2 big jobs, right? And so this is a big decision. And I just want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I've told the trust I'm here for 5 years. So this is kind of my off-ramp into retirement and having a little bit easier, fewer phone calls with less practicing. I don't have to bill my time. So, so that's, but I've committed to them to stay for 5 years, and we'll make sure that we get you timely information, updates, training. I don't know, maybe next slide, I don't know if we have, oh no. So training, we do have a series of trainings that the trust is putting together to assist. One, Monica will be happy to know, is for your board assistants, because I really need it and there's nothing out for them. We also are putting together training for new board members, so board orientation type of thing. If there is a hole, we're putting together open meeting law and public records. My partner, Chris Thomas, has been down to various districts to do, I think in Yuma recently, to do trainings on open meeting law. The trust will pay for someone through prepaid legal to do trainings. So if there's something that is specific that you all want a topic on, let's say procurement, we can fill in for that, whether it be through a remote platform or specific. And then we are having we had for the first time what is called the Policy Governance Summit. It's a little bit like the Law Conference Light is how I would put it. It was a one-day, but it covered the new legislation, all of the topics that might be pertinent to board members. We had cybersecurity, we had open meeting law, we had 2 HR topics, we had a fun keynote speaker who talked about millennials, learned a lot about my kids, so that's good. We will do that again next August. We are talking about pairing up with ASA. So they typically do a fall conference that's called Principle in the Law. And so we're talking about combining with them. So it might be a 2-day. So, and the biggest feedback we heard was no one liked our hotel. So we'll get a nicer hotel. That was one of the points. They want an upgrade. So we did.
Pretty good critique, really. I mean, it's like, okay, so
yeah,
find a nicer place, but the content was good.
I took it as a win, Jake.
Yeah.
So we're looking into that, and that would be typical time frame for that would be late August. This past one was, I think, August 24th was the date we had it.
What questions do we all have?
Oh, go ahead. Okay. So if we decide to move forward with joining the trust, that's of course a timeline of existing policy and future policy. Is there a point, because we have 2 years left on our contract, can we elect not to use that policy even though we're paying for it? Because at some point you're going to lose more money than if you just continue paying the annual and implemented policy from the trust.
The answer to that's yes. So
Okay.
Kyrene just did that. Kyrene
Okay.
had another year, and they are using the trust policies, and they're no longer, they're no longer, even though they're paying for ASBAs, they asked ASBA to take down their link,
Okay.
and they're just moving forward.
Right, because it depends on how long the process can take. That leaving fee can be more than just paying out the rest of the. So that makes a difference.
I
Yes.
apologize if this has already been covered.
No problem.
So what does this, I guess I could say, lack that ASBA does have? I mean, just a difference, even if this may be a better way to go. What are some things?
From a pure policy perspective,
Mhm.
I don't think that there's anything missing. So we were, 4 lawyers, we covered everything.
Yes.
We were really
Okay.
careful to try to make sure that or it's an intentional omission. Like, for instance, the notice of how to serve the school board, we didn't include that, and there was a legal reason for it. The liability lawyers didn't want that in there. But being a member of ASBA, ASBA is a board organization. The trust serves the whole school district, the board and the administration. So there are, just frankly, board members that want to make sure that they still are able to go to the national conference. They're still able to go to the professional development that's available. I would say that's one area in which, and the other area that the trust doesn't do is the trust doesn't lobby for school districts, and ASBA does. And that's I don't know what you think about that, but that's a difference, right? There are many lobbying organizations, EFG is one, RG, excuse me. Other organizations that will lobby the legislature, but the trust only gets involved in lobbying efforts when it concerns the insurance pool itself.
Thank you.
And we could, as even, let's say we decide to go down this road and in 2 years, we tell ASBA, no, thank you, when our time's up. You could still attend their events as a non-member, it just costs more.
Yes.
So you can still go to anything they offer, you don't get the member price.
I didn't know that. That's good information.
My question is, and maybe you don't know, has there been anybody who you presented to that's thought about it and then said, no, thank you, and why did they choose not to go that direction?
Sure. I have a number of boards that have had me come out to, and are thinking about it. Crane Elementary, a couple weeks ago. I know Union's looking, but hasn't asked me to come out yet. I have had some of the smaller school districts have telephone conversations with me and the administrators when they figured out that they were already paying for ASBA. They said, we'll talk to you when this is done.
Okay.
And the reason they just felt like it would be wasteful to spend money. Right. So that's the reason I've heard.
Okay.
You know, just speaking very frankly, from a work product perspective, the product is better. It just is. But it's a cleaner, easier, more manageable system. I don't know if you can go, Luciano, on the Trust website, and maybe I can just show them a little bit.
Sure.
But, many other school districts have chosen or are having concerns of sort of the politics, I would call it. Thank you so much. You don't mind if I touch you?
Nope, not at all.
I have a couple questions, Jennifer.
Sure. So, oops, it's not projecting.
Some of the superintendents I've talked to talked about the fact that the policy is lean, so they find it easy to search. But one of the challenges, whether it was a challenge of getting used to or just maybe a skill situation, is a lot of the legal references are kind of summarized in ASBA policy. The ASBA policies are long.
Right.
And there's a lot of, not a lot necessarily, but there are elements of the ARS that are kind of embedded in the policy. So if you go to the policy on ASBA, you're going to get a good feel for what the legal statute is. And that the trust is leaner, so there are more situations where somebody has to then go from the policy to the ARS, read the legal speak
And
of the law.
I think that's a fair comment. I'm going to give you an example of how we handle that. So this is Dysarts. This is my favorite part of the website, is that you type in that and it pulls up all the policies that have the word survey in them. So as so it's very user friendly. So as you know, the school districts can't have, so that's one area. So it doesn't define in the policy themselves which policy you have to, in the law, there are 15117, there are 17 examples of when you have to get permission from a parent to survey. We haven't cut and pasted those 17 examples. You would have to go into and search and find the word survey and then look and see specifically right here in the policy on parents. You would have, it talks about the survey, but you would have to go into the statute. It's hyperlinked to the 17 areas. So I think that is true, that there's that extra step of having to actually look at the law to make sure that you're understanding. I think that does two, it's a good and a bad, right? It's a little bit of a knife-edged sword. On the one hand, when ASBA kind of cuts the statute and puts it in the policy, if it changes on the back end, they're not capturing that change sometimes as rapidly as they need to, or if you don't update the policy, you don't have the right information in the policy. So your policy, what I find often is that a school district will have the policy, they'll have a procedure, and then they'll have what they actually use in their handbook, and those three things won't match up. So we have tried to simplify it, but I do think that that's fair. And that's one example I could give you.
That was the second part of my question,
Okay.
is in our current model, we have policy, then we have regulation, then we have exhibit. The regulation is basically administrative regulation, in other words, like, here's how we're gonna carry out this policy. And the exhibits, a lot of those are forms that we use on a regular basis, but they're copyrighted because ASBA provided them in their policy updates. So how does that work with the trust as far as exhibits and?
We're developing, I'm showing you Queen Creek's. Queen Creek has what they're calling the policy forms. And they've developed their own set of forms under each chapter. So for instance, this is a good one, board member oath of office. Your board member oath of office, there's a copyrighted form in ASBA's, that says that this oath of office is their copyrighted exhibit, but in fact, it's by statute what you have to say.
The oath of office.
So it's a little, I don't want to give you legal advice about whether you would or wouldn't, but that's an example of how Kyrene has addressed the forms. And I really love how they did it. So now I don't know if I can get back to them, but yeah, so they have a button on the, like underneath their chapters.
I see that.
Yeah, and then it pops in the forms that they're using. Another, a lot we're finding, and the trust is developing its own forms. Right now we're doing a piecemeal. So somebody today asked us for a board member conflict of interest form. We have them, we sent them what they asked for. We will hopefully by the end of, but before the start of the new year calendar, we'll have our own set of forms that districts can look from and pull from. But many of the things that school districts were using, for instance, I bet that Luciano's office doesn't use your forms that are attached to the FMLA leave that is in ASBA's policy, because you all probably have an entity that helps process your FMLA, where Luciano's already developed his own forms. So you have existing forms in your exhibits under your ASBA policies that you don't use. I know you do. That's one example.
Yeah.
So we're trying to clean that up, right? So this is, again, this is an example of what Kyrene has. So they've got forms, none for chapter 2, but we were asked today about superintendent evaluation. Do we have a form for that? We don't. That's a very specialized, in my experience. Boards want to develop their own evaluation form with their own superintendent. So we don't have a form, but I've offered to that constituent, tell me what you are looking at. I can give you some examples. So this is how Kyrene's done it. And then I can show you one more. Queen Creek has, again, I think we had one slide up there, but Queen Creek's got a lot of their forms embedded into, so they've got their, so it's definitely something we can accommodate.
So that's policy, procedure, this is how we do it, and then the form, here's the paper that you might need.
Right.
Labeled out, I like that.
And then, there's some areas like chapter 3, we've got this whole, a lot of procedures on cash control, for instance. I mean, this is a pretty specific procedure about what you should do so that no one's stealing from you, right? But some districts like Mesa Unified has a whole specific manual. It's about yay thick on what they want their employees to do with respect to cash control. So can be district specific. You don't have to use any of these procedures if you don't want to. But if, Mesa, when they're adopting this year, maybe they won't adopt this procedure. They may just state specifically, please refer to and link it. So.
I'm thinking partly in terms of the lift of transition, if we have to develop the forms. I mean, for example, peace officer comes to the school and wants to interview a student. Well, we got a form that they need to fill out. That's a copyrighted form, I believe. So then if we change, then we have to rewrite that form or redevelop that.
I think actually I think that
Is ours
form,
local?
we changed
We do have a number of procedural forms, especially
right
things
there.
that the front office staff at a school use that are
Right.
copyrighted. We have to make sure that we
Transition those out.
come up with our own form.
Well, we are in the business of trying to do that before you even get there, hopefully. But there, like I said, there may be things that you all have that you use all the time that other districts don't. So that's an ongoing process for us.
I have two questions.
Yes.
Do all of your policies, I think you said it, all of your policies do reference the ARS though, law in the policy, someplace on that page though.
They
And it's
do.
a hot link.
Yep, so there's a
Okay.
link on, let's go to chapter 1. So if you talk about board member conflict of interest, we're talking, and this is an example of,
Okay,
this is an example here, like their policy 1106 doesn't have a copyright on it because that was unique to them. So, but you go into it, it hyperlinks within this, so we have in many instances, kind of to Jamie's point about, we've tried to put in what the statute is defining as a remote interest there, right? So we had we have a link to the statute within the body of the policy if it needs more explanation. But at the end of every policy are the legal
The
authorities,
okay.
right?
Okay,
But not in the procedures. So if you go back to,
right.
if there's a procedure, this is, for instance, the grievance procedure for a student who has a discrimination claim, and that procedure is going to give all the details about how you would file, but the procedures don't have any legal embedded links.
The second question is, if we were to become a member, can we see all the other districts and they're just like ASBA? So
This is live.
that's live, and so that's what.
Right.
Yeah, we can
This
see
is
those.
live.
Can you search that?
Yeah.
Entirely, so you have to go to each district and search for the district, okay.
You do. There may be a way to search globally, but I don't think there is.
Okay.
I, again, love this platform. So the search feature is my favorite thing. It's how I've started doing legal research rather than using Westlaw. So I just go to one of our policy manuals and type in the word I'm trying to, find the statute for, and boom, it's really fast.
Yep.
So
What's public? Is this public?
this is public, yeah. So these are the districts that have adopted. I said 13. We don't have one of them up yet. We're waiting on Red Rock.
There is Flagstaff.
Yeah, Flagstaff's up there, right. Yeah, these are the districts that have already adopted and are using the policies. And we haven't had any big issues arise, anybody say, oh, you all forgot, nothing has come up, thank God. That people have said this is a problem. I would say the only, I still represent and still work with Dysart Unified and Scottsdale Unified, although Scottsdale just hired in-house, thank God. So I work there.
In-house
Rats stayed
counsel.
down. But Dysart is still a very active client, and they had one, they weren't as familiar with they had someone file a complaint under their EEO, and they didn't realize that we put in some pretty specific timelines, and they had to scramble a little bit to comply. So that's one area, definitely making sure administrators know what, because they're used to your own processes. So either making your processes, there was no reason to have those timelines in there. One of them was you're going to acknowledge the complaint within 5 days. It's not legally required. It's just good practice. So that was the one that they're like, oh, we didn't know this one, and that was because no one had read it. So that I think is a problem with any policy. You have to know what they are, right? So.
Especially when they're 900
The last thing I had was
pages
just a
long.
comment. I was talking to some superintendents, and you just said it tonight. Your policy updates came out in August. We got ours in October. So I guess the turnaround after the end of the legislative session was markedly different. Although I know there's
Some
a number of
upkeep.
challenges going on at the ASBA from a personnel perspective.
Mrs. Fox, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I mean, this sounds like it's much more customizable than policies that we have.
You seem clean.
Mhm.
That's how Mike Penton described it, clean.
Ms. Monica, you deal with our policy updates. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, as long as she provides training for me, I'm good to go.
And we try to make your job easier, so you would just send us what you want to see as the updates, and we send them to Microscribe update, and it's within 24 hours usually that they're live. But we can also provide training to Monica so that she can do it herself. Right now, she has to do it herself.
Right.
And so if you want to do that, we can do that for you, where you would have your own login and you would actually go in and, some of the platform, it's up to the district how you want to do it. But you can have control over your own site yourself, or you can just send the updates to me or Lillian and we get them up. So we check them over, we make sure they're, that they look right and that there's nothing that was glaringly missed. Or a lot of times, if you look at the template policies, I'll give you an example of, things you have to pick. We talked about in chapter 1, the legal advice policy. So, this has got options, option 1, option 2 for how you use your county attorney, option to add the in-house legal counsel. So sometimes people will forget to remove what's bracketed or to take out the extraneous language. So we go through and make sure that that's correct before we submit it and upload it for you.
Any other questions or comments? I know we've got a lot to think about, but this was very thorough. I appreciate you sharing all of it, and I encourage you to go to the Trust website and check it out yourselves.
Thank you for having me down. It's been really nice to be with you tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice to meet you all. I am going to. Thank you, Luciana. I didn't mess up your computer.
Well, we are moving right along.
Any other discussion?
Any other discussion?
I'll get it.
Is this something that you would like to see on an agenda next month or December? You want to think about it? Do you want to have it on we've had it as an information item, right?
Yes, we did.
And so is this something that we need as an action item, perhaps November, December? Do we want to wait? And when do we want to make a decision, if we make a decision? We have plenty of time to transition. So we have our policies. If this is a road we want to go down, we need to think about our own timelines. And
Yes.
So my main concern right now, which I think I've shared individually with a few board members that have at the conference, is ASBA seems to be in disarray. And they, I think, have made some organizational and board level decisions that are integrity issues that I feel like are problematic.
Yeah.
And I don't see ASBA changing their tack. They seem to be doubling down on some of those decisions that they made that I think are definite integrity issues for the organization. And I don't know, there's been, if you look at the number of people who have left ASBA, either gone to ASA or other law firms, I would hate to see us be in a position where we're scrambling because the ship's sinking. And I think that's unfortunate because our state needs a strong school board association. We need an association that can support school boards and be a reference, a resource, and quite frankly, be a voice at the legislature on behalf of public schools. I mean, now more than ever, right? It's more important now than ever to have a voice at the legislature to support public schools. But I have some real concerns about their stability right now and their integrity moving forward.
one of the things that struck me about the trust is the nonpartisanship, that they're not here, they're not there. It is. This is the stuff. This is, you work with it. You decide what your school district looks like. You decide what your community is, and that's how you govern. It's not leaning one way or the other. So I like that.
This is what the law says.
This is what the law says.
And here's policy that if you follow the policy, will keep you on the right side of the law.
Is there no way to get out of the ASBA contract without paying a penalty, being that everything that's going on? No.
No. I think Dennis checked into it. And basically you just pay them off. which is whatever's left on your contract, which is 2 years. So if we have to pay them off anyway, let's stay where we're at, keep paying and
Because
using,
we can do
whatever
this
we
at the
have to.
same time.
Yeah.
So there's really no breach on their end on a contract?
That's what I was
That's my
thinking.
understanding, and yeah,
I mean,
'cause
that's very
Dennis checked
unusual.
out. I know
Yeah.
that you and I had that conversation at the law office, that you felt like there was an argument to be made.
I would like to look at the contract.
Okay.
I would like to know what you think after you look at it.
Well,
So let's talk, I still want
rather
to,
than,
before we,
yeah, you were asking
finish
about
this.
something in the future.
action item.
Can we get a proposed timeline and we've seen the cost, but, Mr. Shuloff, we can get a proposed timeline that if we were to choose to go down this path, this is what we're looking at.
Transition
committing to.
plan?
Yeah, maybe a couple different options or a couple different
Okay.
timelines.
Then that's the next talking point. And then from there, maybe we can move it to an action item if that's the direction we want to go. I don't want to base it just solely on the amount of work that we have to do, but it does give us time if we want to pursue anything else, self-counsel or however, whatever other options there are. Because as we educate ourselves in this process, more ideas come to mind.
That's good.
I think that would be the first step.
I can help forward some samples to you.
That'd be great.
Is there a way to find out, Mr. Sheldon, if you call up, I don't know if you can do this, call up the various districts that have left the ASBA to find out if there was a way they could find if there was a breach of contract that they were able to get out of it? Is that
I've
even a
talked to
possibility?
A handful of them,
Mhm.
and they timed it with the expiration of their contract, or they just paid
Mm.
to finish the year, so.
I'm not familiar with anyone
What
Who's
would
done
be
that?
the,
taking on ASBA contract-wise.
what would be the upside to pay out? I mean,
Instead of just allowing the 2 years.
just let it
to-
run and
Yeah.
take advantage of the discounted training, because I mean,
Right.
some of the
Yeah.
training is valuable.
It is.
But
Sure.
I mean, I don't understand why you would pay to opt out completely if it's the same dollar.
Well, the policy services and the ASBA membership are different,
Okay,
so you can still be an ASBA member
Mhm.
without subscribing to policy services.
Correct.
And it sounds like that's what a number of districts have done.
Generally, and I have no idea what your numbers are, but generally, to be a member of ASBA is roughly between $8,000 and $10,000 a year, and to do your policy services is roughly between 4 and 6, depending on your
Right.
size. So it's about a $15,000 a year investment over the 4 years.
So yeah, you can have the quote unquote best of both worlds if you want to maintain the membership. You can go to the law conference, the winter conference, get the new board member training, get all that.
Pulse.
The Bolts training, and have your policy services from.
so what is the 3-year contract? Is it the policy or is it the membership?
They're aligned.
Both. Okay, so they're both aligned.
Yes.
So I still understand why any school would pay it to not, I guess,
To just completely get out of it if you have to pay the penalty?
you're kind
Why
of
not
letting them
just
off
stay
the
in?
hook of
Mhm.
paying for it.
I just think that they don't want to be associated any more longer with that organization.
Yeah, what it represents or.
I guess that could be.
The
Yeah.
districts that have completely withdrawn, it's been a political move.
Oh, okay.
I think Mr. Sheldon made a really good point when you said that we don't want to be caught with a sinking ship
Right.
and not have anywhere to go.
Well, the policy is what
Yeah.
saves our bacon, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Absolutely.
Right.
that's what,
Yes.
the membership and the support and the training, that's all great. I mean, that's all really good stuff. But if we're on a sinking ship policy-wise,
Right.
and we're trying to scramble to
Mhm.
make a switch, I just
We
think
don't want to do
that's.
that. Right. Gotta be prepared.
Dangerous.
Who better to guard your bacon than the people who
Who are gonna protect you.
are gonna protect you and
Mhm.
represent you.
Yeah, if you get a chance, just to that point, there's a policy that was written by the individuals who represent school districts with sexual abuse and molestation, and it's really specific about staff-student contact and what your staff members should or shouldn't be doing with respect to communication with minors. And that is, that's an example of what you're talking about, where that's a very unique policy, very specific. Some people have concerns about even, how it's worded because it's so specific, but the reason that exists in the proposed policy manual from the trust is to guard against those claims, so.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again very much.
Thank you
for
so
coming.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna get some transition possible plans as we continue to marinate on this, and right now we can take our break. Okay, well, welcome back, here we are. Thank you, everybody, for being so thoughtful on your online comments, on the comments that you've made in your written manual, to really think about a governance team handbook. And Jennifer's presentation tonight was so timely, because a lot of the work of transitioning is taking a look at policies, practices, regulations, and so on. And so this kind of maybe is an offshoot of that, and some of the comments even indicate let's revamp, let's look back and see, okay, what do we need? So one of the things I'd like to do, just very simply, we're not going to resolve, we're not going to go through, resolve is not the right word, but we're not going to be able to get through every page in this handbook or X them all out or say, yes, let's keep that, but down to the words, because we have punctuation changes, we have a shall that should be a may, or a may that should be a should. But let's just go through let's look at the big picture and then see where our next stepping off point is, okay? So I would like to do.
Hey, can I just kind of reiterate what I put in the Friday report?
Could you reiterate? That was well said.
How this came about.
Yeah. Where did this come from, Jamie?
Prior to, or subsequent to the new roles of the board, every month, Faith and Keith meet with me and to set the agenda. And during those meetings, it frequently, Faith and Keith would talk about just kind of a yardstick for how are we doing? How do we do tonight? How did, after the meeting, how'd the meeting go? And I don't remember which one, or during the conversations, inquired about board evaluation. I told him that in the past, our board hadn't really been all that excited about evaluating itself, but that I would ask around and see what other districts did as far as board evaluation. And it turned out that not very many boards enjoy evaluating themselves based on a pre-select form. Okay, so what I did get was I got this particular one from Lori Doring at Crane, and she had gotten it from 2 or 3 districts that Dale Ponder works with up in Phoenix, as being on the finance board up there with the finance administrators. And what's it called? ASBO. So this is the original version was what Crane had, so we got it. I had Christine go through it and kind of make it make it a District 1 type thing. We went through it and we actually, believe it or not, trimmed it down significantly in EA. There was a lot of repetition or a lot of things I think that were in there, that was redundancy that was not necessary. And then we brought the we brought that draft here. So that was last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So that at the last meeting, we asked people to make comments. So that's where we are right now.
Yes. Again, thank you for the thoughtfulness of going in and going back in and going back in to take a look and even dialogue with each other. That was some really good stuff came of that.
And Teresa has her comments, but she was out of the country, so
No excuse.
they're not on.
Should have taken us all with you.
So what I kind of like to do is do plus, delta, minus. What's there, or what is it that we like about it, or what should we keep? And we can just start by going to the table of contents. You want to display that? What elements are not perfect, but what elements should be there, should we keep, should we hang on to? whether there be reorder or not. So let's just start with any pluses in the area of what we want to keep, hang on to, what needs to be there, et cetera. Just popcorn them out.
Sorry.
Oh, no,
So I'm
Fine,
so
fine,
sorry.
fine.
Does anybody have the Wi-Fi to get?
Are we allowed to use the Wi-Fi in here? I was
Yeah,
gonna hook the.
absolutely.
Your
Okay.
password for your email
Your 85
Oh.
should be the
right
same.
Oh, okay.
So you're saying the credentials, so sorry.
Got it. That's
Okay.
okay. Thank you and thank you. I'll find
I'm
it.
sure it is, but I don't know what it is.
Do you need a
Oh,
hotspot?
sorry.
I'm not sure if I do either, but I might have it written down.
Do you need a hotspot or no? I can
So
use my phone.
I can do that. I can do that if I need to.
You sure?
Thank you. Yeah.
what elements should be here? What should we hang on to? What's valuable?
I'm gonna steal Anthony's thunder. I like the quotes.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Stole my thunder. What are you talking about?
Get back to hooking up my Wi-Fi.
Yes. I like how they,
But really, I mean, the purpose of the governance team handbook, this first operating print down through operating principles.
we need a role and
Roles and
responsibility, so we don't
responsibilities.
necessarily have to live with what's here, but we should have that, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm just kind of looking at the titles.
yes, absolutely.
And then. For me, that stops at agreement and protocols because that's where the policies are. So I'll let somebody else talk on those.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so,
But then getting down to the bottom underneath the policies, the appendix and.
okay, Mrs. Fox, what things do you feel like are valuable to have in there, that are already there?
I mean, I really didn't read it in the
Okay.
sense of what should we be throwing out. I read it just for comprehension and understanding the practical use of it. So,
Okay.
I mean, it's fine as far as what is in there. I mean, for me, looking at this page, the Appendix A was the only one that I saw within the handbook. I don't know where B, C, and D were referenced in the handbook,
Okay,
but, yeah. I mean, so that was the only kind of
Okay.
confusing part.
Adele, is there any things that stand out to you that you would like to say, yeah, let's hang on to that? That definitely needs to be there.
I definitely think that the request for information is important, how we keep requests
From us?
from us. Yes. And how we handle concerns and complaints.
Okay. So that's 18 and 19. All right, we can always come back to that. Let's go on to deltas. Something's there, but it's not quite right. It's something that hey, let's take another stab at this, or let's move it, or it's what we have is too much or not enough. What do we have for deltas?
Policies.
Okay,
I prefer referencing to the policy.
Thank you.
instead of capturing entire pieces, right?
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
it's not copy paste. It's interpreted.
Okay,
So not having interpreted policies, if you want to put the policy in there, but that's kind of going against, I like what the trust does and says, for this reference, this statute, I like the idea of saying for this policy, here it is with a link to it, and then you can read the actual policy.
do you feel that, and I'm saying it because this is how I feel, I'm wondering how you feel about that interpreting it for us, at least in conversation and dialogue, not necessarily written out word for word, because if the governance team, what does this mean to me? What does this mean to you? So if we talk about having an agenda item, or if we talk about communicating with somebody, something that's in policy, I think it would be good for us to have, whether it's in the summer or the beginning of the year or somewhere where we say, well, here's what I think this means. Because if you think one thing about the policy and Teresa and I think something different, we could have misunderstandings based on what we read versus really what is. And turns out, hey, we're all on the same page, but what I read, I interpreted differently from you. So that's what I guess what I'm
I
getting.
think that is exceptionally excellent, and we should strive to do that. However, it should be done at the policy level versus the procedural level. Because if we're going to if we read that policy 5 times, 5 different people, and we all come out with a different interpretation of what it
Okay.
is, we should then all agree on what that is and adjust our policy.
Okay.
If there's a word in there that causes confusion for 2 or 3 people, then maybe we should clarify that. And over time, because those things will come up. Well, I thought the policy meant you can do X, Y, Z. And it's, well, that's not how I read it. Obviously, it's not clear. We should address that policy. And there are there's probably less than 20 policies that the board engages with.
Right,
And it's not too much of a task to review those,
right.
to say, okay, what's everybody's interpretation? Do everybody agree that this is how it is? Yes, no, but something, and we're going to go through that. with
Right.
If we transition to another policy.
Uh-huh.
So that helps to prevent having layers of, and trust me, I've been through this and it's painstaking. I feel for you, Luciano. When something at the top level changes, the ripple effect that goes through, something gets left out.
Right.
And sometimes that leaves you with exposure legally.
Right, legal exposure or something that has to do with money compensation, that's huge.
Or you're leaving a loophole for somebody.
Right.
Right? So my take is the policies, it's, how the board conducts a certain activity. Here's the policy. If it comes up in conversation that there's a misunderstanding, then we really need to review that policy and write it either a little bit easier for everybody to understand, or make it very clear that this is the intent of the board
Okay.
on
Mhm.
how we're doing it. I just don't like having another layer, because you can
Okay.
always go back to because policy trumps procedure.
Right. What I liked about what she was showing us is that I want to say it was Kyrene, but or Dyson, one of the school districts that they had on there, here's the policy, here's the procedure. So this is how it's carried out.
Yep.
And then here's a form that you would use to carry out the procedure that's based in policy.
And what I like about that is there's an attorney that's looking at those
Right.
connections, and it's on the same interface.
Right,
When this changes, obviously this changes,
Right.
and also this.
right.
So I think it's safer to do it that way.
Uh-huh.
So
So
that's my take, because there's
Yes,
a lot
and
of
that's why
policy.
and I think that was a huge thing that came up in the comments and that we've talked about is, we have these policies, they've been established, there are policies, we have to own them. But I think sometimes there is misinterpretation, and so that really goes maybe to policy versus, our procedures don't line up with our policy or vice versa. We're doing this, but we're saying this in policy, and we need to maybe align those. So, and then make sure aligning what we're doing to what we're saying we're going to do, and or changing what we're saying we're going to do to align with what we really want to do, best practice. So to have that alignment, so that we're talking about the scope of this, then this is going to condense the scope of. We're going to bring up these policies, they should be referenced. This is our policy section. Here's where you can go get it, but there might be something like we want to call out as a procedure that's important to us. It might be 1 or 2 versus all of these.
But do you get and
I do.
on the next page will help kind of give more emphasis, I think, for me on this page. What's the next one? The pluses or the?
Minus.
The minus.
Oh,
Like removal. So the deltas are what's there that we could change, adapt, condense, move, something. And then minus is what should be removed altogether. Do people think that there are things here that don't need to be here right now? Because if this is a living document, I can see as our board changes, as our policy, if we move policy services, this might I just want to have something, I wish you could have handed this to me, or we could have handed this to Keith or Anthony or Adele and say, before you start with us, we know that there's an ASBA book that you're going to get, and there's a training you could take, but this is us. This is how this team works, and here's some more nuts and bolts about how we do business.
Yes,
Um,
and because I know Anthony's got it more recent than myself. And when I was looking at this handbook, and the idea of the handbook was from my first 90 days onboarding, right? Timing was right that I wasn't able to go to the new board members meeting, but I did the one in January or February. It wasn't very helpful. It was a lot of information. And that's when I went through and I made that list that I posted on there about what, from my year and a half, almost 2 years experience now, what would have been truly helpful. And a handbook is supposed to be helpful, right? And that's why I put on that list of things that I think are very important, that we would all, even experienced board members, talking about Robert's Rules of Order, talking about what is the procedure for the board? What makes the agenda, the order of the agenda, you know? So I put those
What does
things
that look like?
right, things that are, some of it's backed up by policy, I think it's in there, but a lot of this stuff, because you can read the policy, it gives you a little bit of information. But there's, for somebody coming in not knowing anything, those were the things that I listed on that comment are things that I think would have been very helpful to me. And so I hope everybody got a chance to read those and would like those looked at just as an opportunity. Maybe some of that needs to be
Can you pull
added.
up those comments? Are you, who's in the docs?
Susie
Yes,
has
I
them,
am.
So we use Robert's Rules of Order, right?
No.
Model.
What do we use?
Not directly.
We don't use, so we model it after that,
Right.
but we don't adhere to every
Right.
rule. We can't be held accountable for we miss this thing or that thing, but in general.
Right.
And that's how I was kind of trained, but
That's,
yes,
I was told
that's the
loosely we
model.
follow.
Loosely, yes.
If you have a question about a procedure, that's where you
That's
would
a
go to
good,
find
that's a
it.
reference, and then ask Teresa.
Yeah.
So you can see on the right side, this is what Keith indicated in his comments, things that could be useful in a handbook like this, is what he wishes he would have had when something could have been handed to him. This is how we do business. And I said kind of like, what does this look like practically?
Right. And some of those things, and I mean, onboarding a new board members, of course, we have to come up with all of those.
Sure.
List of available training and the value, right? Because there's a lot of training out there. How much of it really is value and what's the intent of it? The roles and responsibilities of administration, I think that should be in there for new board
Who does
members.
what?
Who does
If you
what?
have a question about Title IX, where do you go? How do you find Susie and then say, now what?
Right. You got to walk around, you know, the one day you get to meet everybody, but you met 30
Right,
people.
yeah.
If I had a piece of paper, even if it didn't have to have the names, but you get those titles and you understand. But, you know, that would have been helpful for me. How the board meeting is run, what are our traditions? How do we do that? There are a lot of intricate things to that. Robert's Rule, the common motions, because you can go through those and pick, what do we commonly do and how is a motion when you have a motion on the table? Because remember my first board meeting, I think there were 2 motions going on at the same time, and I had to get corrected that we couldn't do that. And then, so, I mean, I was trying to read Robert's Rule, it was that thick. I know you can scroll down just a little bit. That was kind of, you know, explanation. That's a big one for me, is the vouchers, you know, something in there. You're signing these vouchers, the money's already been expended. You're just not ratifying it, but something so you can go back to, because if somebody asks you, you got to, well, I'm signing because we're supposed to. ASB has a really neat legal chain of authority on their webpage. It goes from state down to school boards and everything in between. It's just a reference that I thought would be good to be in there. You know, explaining of the bonds and the school tax. You can read about them, but, you know, something how our school is handling those things, maybe even a mission statement from Jamie on his perspective of those. I know we try not to tax our
Right.
community. We get a lot of grants, we get a lot of money.
Elevator speech, one pagers.
Yes, yes. And, you know, important, the other one I think I missed were important dates. A calendar of important dates, not the board meetings, but the 100th day, and what does that mean? When is the testing? You know, you can even get from there to the letter grades, and what is the impact of those letter grades on the school? Just, those are informational things that I think will inform a new board member, and even, I mean, I will, trust me, I put these because I still have questions on some of this stuff.
And those do come up in our Friday reports, but wouldn't it be nice to know in January what's gonna happen months
year.
or a semester or a year from now?
Yes.
Because you can anticipate it, because here it is, okay, I can go back, I can pick up my handbook and it's useful to me.
Yes, you can look at the calendar and I can say, well, I guess July is going to be busy, even though, you know, that's right after the budget. But that is what I put, because I don't like to just say these things shouldn't be in there without putting an option on the table of here are a list of things that I personally would have found useful.
Those are all good things that I think would help somebody coming on, or somebody that's been on already for a little while, like me.
Right, Faith and I will
It'd
take a
be
minute
great
or
to
two
know.
after the meeting and say, you know, how did that go? Is there
Yeah.
anything we can do to improve?
Right. When Gary Knight was here, I said, come here a second. He came up and said, tell us how we did today. Because how many board meetings has he ever been through, sat at, run? Frequently turn and ask Teresa the same. So the check and balance of how are we doing and operating to the bigger picture of getting to our evaluation, but wouldn't it be nice to have a touch point that we don't have to just wait until the one time a year that we come back and say, we need to pull it back. What we're not doing, we said we were gonna do, and here it is.
Right.
So.
And a lot of those are going to reference back to policies.
Right,
And
100%.
So that is the crux of why I put that comment in there, because I think it's missing a lot of real elementary.
The practical side of
And
it.
if we want to improve our board meetings or continue to strive to do better, I think understanding the foundation is the first step.
And the things that so protocols and understandings, we need to have those discussions. We need to know this is how we do things. But perhaps we could condense the degree to which I don't want to say belabor, but how we hammer out. And remember, again, Jamie didn't pull this out of thin air, and Faith didn't sit down at her computer one day. We've pulled this from other districts where you can clearly see what they were having a problem with. Like, how many times did we see no secrets?
No surprises.
No surprises.
We probably took 4 or 5 references to no surprises. Clearly, that board was having a problem with people bringing stuff up at board meetings,
Right.
or bringing stuff up out of the blue that caught people by surprise or put them back on their heels or whatever. And that's just a trust issue.
Right. So we have this starting point. It's a point of discussion for us. We've taken a look at it. What I will suggest or volunteer or something is to take, if the governance team is interested, for me to take the comments, suggestions, pluses, deltas. I didn't get to the minuses yet. Well, we can actually pull out if you think are things that absolutely don't belong there, and then maybe reconfigure, reduce, and amend the draft. So go to draft 2 and see where that takes us. Not that we have to say in 2 weeks we're going to come back and look at draft 2. It's an ongoing process as we live through this and then perhaps transition policies. But I would be happy to make this my project with any member of EA or Christine or somebody, Monica, you, and maybe draft 2 and include the comments that you've shared today.
V2.
Yeah, I think what might
V2.
help you with V2,
Uh-huh.
if we can all, over the next 7 days, go through all of these policies that are in here, board meeting agenda items, voting conduct, and put down understand, right? So if we all understand it,
Who,
then no reason to address it. That's a removal, right? If we don't understand it, if it's an area that would like more information on, then that's a valuable, or you can just put valuable or not valuable.
uh-huh.
You know, go through it, or if everybody wants to write it on a piece of paper and then just drop it off with Jamie in a week to 10 days. Just right next to each of the titles, put valuable, not valuable.
You're
And
reviewing
then-
the policies, you said?
I mean, you can go through the whole thing, because
So
we
you-
got to kind of melt this
Right.
down to something that we all find valuable, and those things that the majority of us or all of us don't find valuable is probably going to be the same going on, but it's a living document. So as time goes on, people are this should be redone. But I think to help with what you're volunteering to do would be better served if she knew what the board felt was valuable.
Right.
Instead of sitting here going line by line. We can, I don't mind. But I think it would be valuable if we presented you with a,
Right, more feedback.
yeah, and we can even use the table of contents, just one
Right.
page, print the one page and put a V or NV next to it to help you, and then you can just take that,
I'll
put it in
duplicate it and
metrics.
keep it in Google and send it, share it as a Google Doc. And everybody can go into it, and then you can see what everybody else said too.
I think if you keep it independent,
Okay,
then you might get a little bit more,
Okay.
I don't want to say influence, but if you got 4 Vs on there,
would
then the
someone
fifth
feel
one
like
will be
they're
V
like, oh, okay.
also, or if you
Alright.
get 4 NVs
Okay.
and somebody finds it valuable, you want to find, because if you have 4 non-valuables and 1 valuable, then as board president, it also allows you to know that there are 4 not valuable and 1 valuable. There's something about that. Then that
Right.
gives you the opportunity to seek out, is it something that you don't understand or something you just think is valuable and should be there? And then you can address it
Mhm.
that way. So 2-pronged, but if we were to provide you that guidance,
Yeah.
then you can go down and kind of
Mhm.
do that. And even, I mean, I'm going to throw my list out there and say, hey, anybody else want to add to this? What do you think's valuable
Right.
on this list and what's not?
Right,
To help you, so that way you're not making version 19,
right.
like trying to get a Speaker of the House.
And I'm also interested,
Sorry.
I'm also interested in knowing, because if this is a governance team handbook, it needs to be valuable to Susie and Dwayne and Luciano and Jamie and Dennis and Monica. Other part of the governance team needs to know, how do we interact with you? How do you interact with us? What can we expect? What can Susie expect if we have a concern
Mhm.
that we hear at Brownie's Cafe, or we get the parent phone call from Alice Byrne? What can they expect from us so that they know, okay, well, I know Faith is supposed to call me. Why did she call Adele instead and rile up everybody on the board instead of just calling me and I would have had an answer? You were going to say anything?
Yes, I wanted to say, I think everybody knows that a lot of these policies on here, they don't match our actual policies, right? I mean,
I looked a
hot
couple
links-
up
I
today.
clicked some of the hot links and they did.
maybe some of them didn't, but I was really, of course, I made the comment on the BEDBA.
And that's our policy.
Okay, let me see how I'm looking at this incorrectly then.
Okay.
Yeah, this BEDBA is different in here than a policy bridge, as far as I know.
That's a link to policy.
This right here?
Yeah, when you link on it and you click on it, where do you go?
Nowhere. Let's see.
There it is.
Goes to you.
Okay, let's see. Have the opportunity to bring up new ideas. So that's why I was making all those comments on here, because this is actually contrary to our actual policy that I've been looking at in Policy Bridge.
The text under that, this part.
It's an interpretation versus.
Yeah, I don't know, but I
the
mean,
specific.
The text here, is that what you're talking about?
yeah, this is all different. So like, for example, if you look at this and then you go to the actual policy and Policy Bridge where it says policy BEDBA, I mean, when I see that right there on that, I think that is the policy. But if you read that and then you read this, to me, they're two different things.
Right.
That's
So
I mean,
what-
completely different. I mean, I actually thought this was copy and paste it from another district's BEDBA.
So
That was
what
in
that
it.
was the same policy, BEDBA, interpreted and explained in more detail, because that's a very lean policy, saying, okay,
Mhm.
here's what's behind it. You should be able to do X, Y, Z, and here's the protocol. Here's your first step. Here's what you should do. So this is an explanation in depth, if you're going to explain it to somebody, of that very lean policy. And I think that's where the confusion comes from, is the policy words are these, and then in this handbook, they're not copy and pasted from the policy. It's an explanation of, here's how you go about that. It's an interpretation or,
So,
It's like a regulation.
okay,
Part
so-
of it is more like a
Regulation.
regulation.
Yes.
so here's my thing, because I spoke with, so my interpretation, I spoke with Charlotte Patterson at ASBA. I asked her interpretation. She said exactly what I thought it was, which is actually contrary to this interpretation. And I can say why. If you pull up, can you actually go back to the other one,
To
please?
the,
Yeah, the original.
Mhm.
So let me read, actually, okay, can you make that a little bit bigger, or should I walk up there? My eyes, guys, sorry.
Right over here, Anthony.
Oh, okay, actually, I can see that.
It's right here.
Oh.
So, okay. The second, under regular, the superintendent will prepare board meetings in consultation with the board president. The next part, the superintendent or board members may place items on the agenda. Any board member desiring to place an item on the agenda will notify the superintendent of the particular item of business at least 5 working days before the meeting. So it doesn't say request. Like if we look at Crane School Districts, there says something about requesting or something. So when I spoke to Charlotte, she says, yeah, she said for yours, she says you have the right to put it on there. So it's not a matter if you and Jamie get together and decide you want to or don't want to. She says that we, as individual board members, as does Jamie, as a superintendent, we each have the right to put it on there, except for the very bottom part. Can you scroll down? Or actually right there, these procedures may be altered by the superintendent during an emergency or when compliance would be impractical. However, the superintendent shall comply with any legal requirements. So,
Scheduling, especially.
right, so I asked Charlotte, I said, what happens if any superintendent just doesn't put it on there for whatever reason? She says, well, they need to be operating in good faith. So she told me her interpretation, like I just said. She says that we individually, we have the right to put it on there. Now, if we go to the other one.
Okay,
if you
wait,
could
can I?
please-
before
Yeah,
we
sure, go
there,
ahead. Yeah,
I think there's an operative word there. It's called may.
Okay. What's
It's
that?
may. The verb is may,
right?
not shall.
Well, shall means that we have to.
Shall means
Right.
that you shall be able to do that. May means that you may.
That I may do it. If I say
Right.
you may go to the store, if somebody says, may I go to the bathroom? You may go to the bathroom, right? If I say you shall go to, if I say you may go to the bathroom, that means you can if you want to. If I say you shall go to the bathroom, that means you're going. And again, Charlotte Patterson,
Well,
the
this-
policy analyst at ASBA, she said the same thing with me.
I think,
I hope this will be a topic of discussion for the board because
Because that's an important point.
it's a very important point.
Yeah.
And I guess I would put an NV on this one because there needs to be either in understanding
Right.
or in policy
Mhm.
some kind of restraint in this area, in my opinion. That's my professional opinion. Okay. The board meeting is designed to do the business of the board, of the business of the school district. It should be relevant. There should be rationale for why somebody wants something put on the board agenda. I can rationalize anything that I put on the board agenda. I never just say, this is something I want to talk about or I want to do. Okay, I can rationalize it because I've got, here's A, B, C, and D, why I think this is an important piece of discussion, information, potential policy, whatever. I think if that's the interpretation of that, that's not the interpretation that the attorney gave me some time ago when I had a question about this a couple of years ago. He said his interpretation of that was that there's discretion between, and he said sometimes you just have to tell a board member no. That was what my attorney told me, what our attorney told me. But the fact is, I think there should be some kind of some agreed upon threshold that's met to bring an item to the board agenda.
may I interject?
Yes.
So I think that there should be some dialogue. And I think the best dialogue is in person, whether it may be on the phone, but in
Absolutely.
person is the best.
Mhm.
For example, and here's maybe it's trivial to you, but I don't know if you all got phone calls, but Keith and I got phone calls from a parent or a community member, it was pretty much anonymous, that there were drop-off pickup issues at Alice Burn, and you board members need to go out there and look at it and do something about it. We didn't put it on the board agenda. We let the superintendent's office know, who let the principal know, who made a plan and fixed it. So sometimes there are issues that come up from our parents, from our community, from someone I talked to at Brownies, that warrants attention. We can't ignore it. It might mean that we say, Susie, I have this thing, what should we do? Do you think the whole board needs to get involved? Maybe we need to have it on the agenda. Well, what's the data say? What does the evidence say? Is it one parent who was in my ear? Was it 4 people at the gym? Was it parents from all over the district inundating the district with phone calls? I think that if you're talking about a threshold, I'm thinking about data or evidence. What does the data show, or what does the evidence show that this is something that needs to be addressed by all of us in a public setting versus handled at a campus level? So that's what I'm thinking when we talk about what should get on the agenda.
What I put down here in response to this was, I think the board should look at policies BG and KE as well, because they give some background and some information about developing policy, passing policy, and the processes for responding to community questions and concerns.
Sure.
So I think, and I hope we can sit down and talk about all this, because I think that informs the board agenda piece. Maybe the trust is set up a lot better to where this is, where this is all kind of together, but it's all over the board in our current board book. But
Anthony, is there something specific?
Well, I'd like to add back to that. I should not add
Sure.
to that. I want to just continue.
Sure.
If on a contract, for example, we have our lease, my rental lease, it says, I shall pay, it's got the word shall, shall pay, $2,000 per month
Right.
for rent. That means I'm required to,
Right.
right? So if that was supposed to say shall up there, then that would mean that I would have to bring agenda items.
Or would it say the
Right.
superintendent shall place on the agenda any item brought to him from a school board member? And that's why
Right.
where the may is
Mhm.
could be confusing, because the superintendent and board president may put it on the agenda, or you may bring it, or if you bring it, we shall put it on. And I think that's where this one's kind of wishy-washy.
So when I was
Teresa,
at,
do you want
I'm
to weigh
sorry.
in at all?
Can I finish what I was saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay. So I was talking to Charlotte Patterson when I was asking her about that. I said, well, what gives me the right to do that? And then we looked at Cranes. Crane says, any board member proposing an item for consideration of placement. That's different
that's better.
than one up there.
Mhm.
Well, from your perspective, maybe, right?
Yeah.
I say it's not. That's different than what's up there. And so she and I were talking about that. And she says, you're one of the few districts that you as a board member have the right to put something on the agenda without the superintendent's approval.
Mhm.
Looking at it from that angle because of the may instead of the shall, and because of looking at it with Crane. She goes, that's what it would look like, Cranes, if it were left up to the superintendent.
But it is, if you go back a bit, it is left to the superintendent and the board president on what is on the agenda. So it is permissive on 2,
Where am I?
On this or the other page?
Going up a little bit.
whatever we're talking about, the May.
Oh, that's the other page. That's the other page.
Can you hit there it
Yeah.
is.
Okay, go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, so the superintendent shall prepare
Mhm.
the meeting agenda. That's in consultation with the board president, so they decide what's going on the agenda. As a board member, we may place an item of the agenda. We give them 5 days. And what has to go on the agenda, depending on what kind of, for us, is going to be a subject that is within our discretion of having a vote or having information so that we, would be able to vote on that.
Right.
I was gonna piggyback off when you're asking about a threshold. I think that executive, legislative type actions, those that fall under our responsibility, which is not is it the executive or the legislative? No, we're legislative. So if it falls under that umbrella, then that would be that threshold, asking about, where's the teachers or what's going on with Alice Byrne. That's the superintendent's and the principal's responsibility. That would be one of those, that's your threshold. That doesn't go on the agenda. Unless it's a situation that is found to be negligence, or we think there's something
policy,
malicious
yeah.
going on, it's violating policy, but then that goes back into our lane. But I think that in which falls under our responsibility is a given that it goes on there. Because the other side of it is, if it goes on there as a action item, if you don't get a second or any involvement, then it dies. Right, so then that leaves the discussion to the board members to decide whether it was a valuable item on there. If it's an informational, you run the risk of somebody grandstanding and standing up there for an hour talking about something. But, I mean, I think there's value in having the board members be able to place something on that falls in our responsibility, because we can't interact amongst ourselves to find that. Because it would be really nice if we can all sit down and say, hey, guys, I think this is an important item to put on the agenda, and everybody looks at you like, it's not our responsibility. Oh, well, that's good to know. I know we're using you as that filter, but a board member and a superintendent making a decision on what the board discusses, that's real small, and there's no mechanism to get the other board members feel on what, if it's a valuable subject to be on the agenda.
Especially if they're
Without
supposed to be
putting
the
it
ones
on there.
making the policy.
Well, I would like to think that our superintendent or our clerk of the board
Any
on the
superintendent that we
county
would happen to be
would
over there.
take into consideration, you have 5 working days before the meeting, obviously they're gonna take a look at it, see if there's any support, if it's something that absolutely, can be taken care of at their level, or if it actually has to go on the agenda. I mean, I would like to think that's what happens.
Are we talking about something specific?
No, I'm
No,
just talking
so-
about.
Well, I am, but I can't say anything because of the open meeting law.
Right.
And so Jamie and I were having a back
In
and
general,
forth, yeah.
okay, so the way this reads, the way that the interpretation that Anthony and the person at ASBA, whom that is that on any given Tuesday, Adele can go to women's club at the church, and Teresa can go play golf, and Keith can meet with some contractors, and Anthony can go to an event, and Faith can go to book club. And all 5 of those people could come back the next day and email me and say, I want this on the agenda because I was talking to some constituents last night. There should be some threshold that, number 1, we know who the constituents are. Number 2, that there's been some sort of effort, good faith effort for the constituents to go through the system so that they can maybe have their questions answered administratively. And then there is policy that says then if the administrative policy procedures are exhausted, then they can go to the board. Okay. I think we need to be careful, and you guys are gonna be here long after I'm gone. Okay. I think the board needs to be careful, and I want to caution the board about setting in precedents and putting procedures in place that circumvent the actual operation of the district. I think it can be problematic if individual board members, no matter who they are, can, based on a conversation that they had with constituents 1, 2, 5, 20, circumvent the system and place an item on the agenda. I think that's fine in a lot of other areas. I think that's what the legislative area is about. I think that's what the Senate and the House of Representatives and those things. I think those are political forums. But I just want to caution the board for posterity, I guess, about creating processes that circumvent the district, circumvent administration, and allow people without having demonstrated and without having a good faith effort to get questions and concerns addressed through the system from being able to put them on as an action item. I just think if you a lot of times it's instructive to kind of take an idea to kind of its absurd extreme. If you took it to its absurd extreme, you could potentially have all 5 board members wanting, or in this case, having the right to place multiple items on the board agenda for any given board meeting, without going through an administrative process, without trying to direct the constituents to the appropriate administrative personnel who can discuss their concern with them. That's my concern on a large scale.
I respect that. Can I say something that's kind of,
Of course.
so I was just thinking you have, what about when there are 2 school districts in the same area? One action item is on the agenda, and then the other school district, the superintendent working with the board president, decide not to put it on. So I mean, I don't see how that's really fair for the community.
Well,
That one district said yes and the other said no for whatever reason.
is it like,
You know,
so is
it's
it,
a
are you talking like
specific- it's-
Crane, or are you talking like Somerton or something?
Any 2 school
Okay.
districts,
So
I don't know, the high school district, for example.
All right. I know what I want to pay attention to is our 8,000 kids.
Right.
And our 1,000 employees and our families.
84.
8,400. Yay,
Right.
keep going up. So that's what I'm concerned about. I'm less concerned with what happens. I'm interested, curious, and follow what happens at Crane or Somerton, Gadsden, Yuma Union, but we're a K-8, and so I'm concerned about our 8,000s of students and their families and our employees. And while I'll pay attention to that, and it could inform a decision, that's who I perceive as my constituents.
Mhm.
I'm talking in so general because I feel like I'm not following, but,
Right, well, that's okay. You're gonna find out with Jamie and Keith, so I'm just gonna leave it at that.
okay,
Because I mean, there's
Okay.
no way for you to know anything, so,
okay, well, we'll get,
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
I don't think that we've ever, I think we have tabled issues, not tabled, but I mean, pushed them forward, like saying, hey, that's an agenda item, but let's put it out a month. I don't know that we've ever knocked anything right down. So I said, when we get to it, we get to it. We're gonna meet next week, so then we'll know, but I think
Okay.
this is a valuable conversation to have, and we need to
Sure.
agree on it, but I appreciate the conversation starter.
I think I can shed some light on Anthony's point, which I think is, I
Okay.
think from a community perspective, I think it's valid, okay? And that's where it's important for sometimes board members and administrators to be able to, on an individual basis, conversation by conversation, educate people.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times over the last 37 years I've heard, why is it this way in this district and this way in this district? Well, if you remember the first study session we had in August, we were looking at some various policy. One of the things that came up is that the school board is a political subdivision, okay, and their sole responsibility is, and this is a key word, this district,
Mhm.
right? I think one of you pointed it out in our small group. So we don't, a given school board doesn't necessarily take action on something just because another school board did. Okay, you could end up with a kind of a bandwagon thing. And in this day and age, you could have, you can hear about what school boards are doing all over the country. You can get on YouTube or whatever. And, so I think it's important to understand, and I think there is serious, when I came down here, I'm like, what is all this K-8,
Yeah.
9-12? Never heard of such a thing, everything's K-12, where I came from. But I think, the merits of that aside, I think every school board can determine on their own. And there are certain things that high schools deal with very prominently that rarely come into play in a K-8 scenario.
Well, you
And
just hit,
and
I'm
vice
sorry.
versa.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just gonna say, you kind of hit something when you said that every school, I think you say every school board can hit on their own. Well, in order for us to hit on it, it has to be able to get on the agenda. I just want to make that point. But I'm listening to everything you're saying, I am, and I'm taking it in.
And I think every board should have a set of guidelines or understandings
Operating
or
principles.
agreements
Mhm.
that they're going to have a certain, there will have been a certain amount of due diligence done prior to requesting an item, especially an action item.
Mhm.
Especially a policy item.
Yes.
And that's what I believe either BG, I put BG and KE down there because they both have to do with either solving constituent concerns or developing policy. So it just needs to be, these things need to be kind of filtered through these other policies, which to me is one of the confusing things about the ASBA policy with all these different letters. Be much better if, I kind of like the trust setup.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've covered a lot of things, and I think we've had some really good discussion, and we are at 7:30 already, so I'm going to recommend that we adjourn the meeting shortly, but are there any next steps, next practices? We've talked about, he's going to look at the possible transitions to a possible move to the trust. We're going to continue to think about what other vehicles are there for policy, and where do we want to go with this? I'm going to draft a V2 when I would like, if you give me a deadline, it would be way easier than me just saying, I'll work on it.
Why don't you just work on it and then let us know.
I'll help you.
Yeah.
If you want to divide and conquer.
Sure.
Today's the 23rd,
When's our meeting?
14.
I'd like to have something by the 14th. Like, we walk out on the 14th and I can tell you, hey, you're going home tonight and now it's there. So in the next couple weeks, take a look when I see you again.
Okay.
All right.
So the
And I will do the
14th.
one pager. And I don't know, and I might think of other words, being the English teacher, valuable, not valuable.
Yeah, I just threw that out there being a mechanic.
But yes, I know what you're saying. Yay or nay. Okay, are there any other items that are related to the handbook or to policy services? We've stayed a long time tonight. I appreciate the really good conversation though. There being none, meeting adjourned.